Hello and welcome to the latest webinar from Emergency Services Times. I'm Catherine Levin and I'm the editor of Emergency Services Times. Today we're going to turn to the topic of optimising video solutions for the emergency services with our partner Semtech. In our webinars we ask our speakers to share their work, their insights and thoughts on the future. The webinar's a chat, there's no presentation or slides. It's a valuable conversation that leaves you inspired to find out more. We have a Q&A function on our webinar software. You can see it on the side there. So if you want to contribute questions, please do. Keep them nice and short, and we'll come to them as we go through our conversation this afternoon. You'll receive CPD accreditation for being part of the conversation today. You'll get that by email from us fairly soon after the live recording. And then if you're watching on catch-up, we'll send that to you within the month. Our plan today is to run for 50 minutes in total. So let's get started. I'll just wait for my panelists to join me on screen. There we all are. Hello, everybody. So I'm delighted to introduce Daniele Cognolato, Neil Hendry, and Nick Gridley. Daniele is a sales and channel director for Semtech. Neil is defence and government director for digital barriers, and Nick is TSU manager for North Yorkshire Police. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So let's get started with the problem we're trying to solve. And so this is all about optimising video. What is the problem that we're trying to solve here, Nick? So you come from North Yorkshire Police. Can you tell us how your force is using video and what difference it makes as a result of having? What's the problem here?
As a technical department, not an ICT department, a operational technical department, we deal with live operations, live incidents, planned and quick time. So we get requests for lifetime video streams from incidents or operations or major events, and streaming them back to a control room or incident room somewhere within our force. Not always one location, it could be moved around. So for us, it could be an urban area, it could be a rural area, and we need that connectivity for that. If it's a rural area, we always suffer with signal problems. And an urban area, if it's a major event or a concert, the congestion of the amount of public that are there at that time. So getting that back for us has always been a problem, and getting it back into a control room in a format that's compatible with cameras and equipment we have out on the grounds, and bringing it back into a control room where it's compatible with our media server.
Okay, so you've set out lots of difficulties with using video, but in terms of the operational problem, what difference does it make for officers to be able to see live video from scene, whereas perhaps 5-10 years ago they wouldn't have seen it, so they'd still have to work without it? So operationally, what difference does it make to be able to see that in real time?
Yeah, definitely feedback we get from the commanders that are making the decision, situational awareness of exactly what's going on. Yes, someone can be on the radio describing something, but when it can physically be seen real time, it's easy for people to make decisions.
Yeah, so it's that improvement of situational awareness to make better decisions.
Yeah.
In terms of using video, how long has your force been using video?
I would say, Neil, you might be able to help me with this. The software, we've probably been a good
12 years, I think it is, Nick.
Probably longer. Probably longer as well. A long time.
So it is business as usual video. It's not new to you.
Yeah, again, what's new for us is the router that's been put onto now. So it just gives us more options and a lot more flexibility.
All right, well, let's get into that. So let's talk routers then. So Daniele, you're from Semtech. You provide a router that makes a difference in terms of all of the problems that Nick set out for us there in terms of being able to get that video to and from where it needs to be. Could you just set out what it is your router does in order to help with the force needing to have better video to help it with improving public safety?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So, as Semtech, we have been involved in deployments across the world with police agencies, specifically in North America and as well in Europe. The router we are talking about is actually an edge piece of equipment that is sitting on either a mobile unit like a police car, or in certain cases in fixed locations that are remote and so connected via a wireless connectivity, so cellular, if we talk about network. The issue actually that were mentioned by Nick were about the signal and about eventually the congestion of the networks while you are trying to get this video back to the control room. The piece of hardware that we provide, the routers, are basically managing the different conditions that are sometimes unpredictable. And so, for example, if you go in a zone, in a rural area where 5G is not available, then you have to fail over on 5G, on 4G, or even in an area where certain networks that are your preferred networks are not available, so a coverage gap. You need to manage that failover into other networks that are eventually available. So the router seamlessly go and do that. So basically, manage the failover seamlessly, and so include and that's actually providing the basic for the communication. On top of that, we also provide a capability or capabilities to as a processing power to host applications that can help in creating a better condition to stream up the videos. And I think Neil will talk about that a little bit later.
Okay, thank you. Gosh, it's doing quite a lot of hard work there by the sounds of it. So Neil, do you want to explain to us how digital barriers fits with Semtech and their router in terms of solving the problems that Nick set out for us just now?
Yeah, of course, Catherine. So Nick highlighted earlier on, we've been working with Nick's Force for probably is more than 12 years, more like 15 years. So we've always given them the ability to be able to get video out of difficult environments using a sort of patented codec that we do to reduce the bandwidth by up to 90% and give him that high quality video. And what's changed is this was a physical box basically that Nick would have to deploy. Bearing in mind, Danielle's just talked about the router, which gives a lot of other functionalities. What we've done over the last 12 months at Digital Barriers is we've effectively created a software container, so a piece of software that can be loaded onto the Semtech router, delivering that same capability that Nick was talking about. So, previously where Nick would have to be using lots of boxes all over the place for multiple different scenarios and multiple use cases, now what we're doing is we're just loading that piece of software onto the Semtech container, and we're taking that video and we are effectively getting that video over constraint networks. You heard Nick talk about some of the environments that they're in. I think the first point to note is with Nick's use cases, Nick requires something to be deployed rapidly. So, if I look at ordinary CCTV, that's sat on a fixed network, so that's not an issue. However, if Nick needs to deploy a video sensor or whatever sensor it is, and it has to go into an environment where there is no fixed infrastructure, the only way you can get that data back is over cellular communications. So the digital barriers codec that we use effectively solves that problem for Nick, but more importantly, and to answer your question, now that we've turned that into a software container and have loaded that onto the Semtech router, it opens up a whole bunch of different capabilities.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that's good. So we can talk about the capabilities, because I think it's quite useful now to talk about what it is that the forces are using video for. So we talk about, for instance, drones. So you're getting a lot of live feed from up in the sky down to an incident where there is no notice. It's probably rural. North Yorkshire is a massively rural force. So how, Nick, would you see that drone feed working in this technical environment that Daniele and Neil have described to us? How would that work and improve things for you?
Yeah, so we would take video feeds from multiple things. It could be a drone, it could be CCTV from a building, it could be a video van, it could be body-worn video. So we can take any of them feeds, and it's a stream for us to get into our fourth network that then can be put into our video media server, which happens to be Milestone. It's compatible with all the equipment that we use, the codecs on the cameras. So we don't just have one camera, a drone camera, a CCTV camera, a vehicle mounted camera. They're all different. We can get that feed in and get it back to our media server where it's compatible with other functions that we might use.
So what you're saying is basically it doesn't really matter where the feed's coming from. It's all going into this environment and then being kind of unpacked so that it can be understood at the other end. I think Neil does something around the sort of translation of it doesn't matter what the format is because you can do something with that to make sure that it fits into this video management system. Is that right?
It is, Catherine. So, back to Nick's point, lots and lots of different forces are using different command and control systems. They're using different video management systems. They will use those systems for everything from evidence, to storing the evidence, the evidential video, through to actually, back to Nick's point, giving them a common operating picture where they're viewing, whether it's a drone feed or a CCTV feed or whether it's a feed from a camera. So again, as part of the solution that Digital Barriers provide Nick and other forces is to be able to get that video over the network in the first instance. It's a proprietary compression, a low latency proprietary compression. All of these systems that we talk about, and Nick talks about Milestone, these systems require video to be ingested in a standards-based format. So as part of the system, the minute the video gets back into an environment where bandwidth is no longer an issue, there's a tool that will transcode that video and push that video back into a format that can be accepted by any police force's video management system or any police force's video management system. And that's how we do it for Nick. So, Nick is running some very, very specialist other technologies at the edge, at the back end. And in order for those technologies to be able to ingest that video, it's got to be presented back into a standards-based format. And we use something called a VMS gateway, which basically just gives them that video in the format they require.
And does that VMS gateway, how does that relate to the router? Is it in the router, on the router, your software you were talking about?
No.
Let's let Daniele talk about that. He's smiling at me.
Go on, Daniele.
No. It's on the other side, actually, on the server side, I guess. The router actually is an enabler. Basically, you basically have on the edge, on the vehicle or on the CCTV fixed location, wireless fixed locations. You have a hardware that is capable of encoding and processing the encoder. The client that is used by the client from Digital Barriers. That video is then flow into the server side, and on the server side you have the VMS system that Neil was talking about.
Okay, and in terms of you were talking, when we were talking just now about failover and when the connectivity fails. So if you've got this files moving around, you want to go from the incident, getting it back to the control room, but you don't have a fixed position and you may be in this rural environment, but then your network fails, even though you're compressing these videos, as you've said already. What do we do when the network fails you? Do you have to, how do you fail over? What's going on there?
Yeah, well, depending on the environment and depending on how you did the implementation of your infrastructure, and when I talk about the infrastructure, I mean the communication layer. So it means the router and what is inside of the vehicle. You could have a simple failover between, so a roaming between a network and a second network, so an operator and another operator, if the second operator is available and can provide connectivity and bandwidth. Otherwise, the ultimate, let's say, solution would be to have a failover to an external SATCOM that, in this case, will provide the latest mean for communication and so providing back the video feeds to the VMS system.
Okay. And so, Neil, looking forward to the emergency services network and where it will be on EE, I believe. Do you see any issues around connectivity? Will it improve in the future? What difference will that make? Or is it a red herring?
I think Danielle's also talked about this. As part of the emergency services network, it is a single network. And Danielle's already highlighted, one of the advantages of the Semtech router is actually it can fail over between multiple network providers. And I think that's a really, really key point to take away. More so, rather than wait for the link to fail, what the Semtech router will do is it will automatically start looking and negotiate a seamless transition between those networks. So, historically, the way that forces would do it is that they would actually have multiple different modems. They'd have one modem on one network, they'd have another modem on another network, they'd have another modem on a network. The Semtech router does that for you now. So going back to the emergency services network, like any other network, it's going to have gaps. There's going to be areas where there aren't coverage. And if you flick back to Nick's use case, and Nick has already highlighted that actually when they're deploying some of these things, they don't know what network is the cable is going to operate on. So I think that feature and function of the Semtech router, in my view, and Daniel, please jump in, but I think is a leap forward. Correct. It's a phenomenal technology advancement.
Yeah, no, I cannot be on agreement on this one.
Excellent. Okay. So going back to use cases, because I think it's really useful to keep bringing it back to what the need is. So Nick, we've talked about sources that you can control. So your drone feeds, your body-worn video, live facial recognition, if you're using that, ANPR for number plate recognition. But when it comes to sources of video which are not under your control, so for example, CCTV feeds coming from retailers or shopping malls or wherever they're coming from, you don't own that. That's not your control. So if you wanted to tap into that CCTV and bring it into this environment using this router, how A, do you do that, and B, how would you go about it?
So previously, if we've had a request to bring in some CCTV or live feeds from an arena or a shopping centre, working with their IT company, we would take a feed from them cameras, and then that would go back into our system. So it might just be as basic as a camera feed that we've taken, or it could be a multiple screen of 4 or 5 cameras that we've taken in, and it's working with the IT people from the for instance, a shopping centre or an arena, but we would plug that into the encoder and get that back to our server, should we say, and then obviously it's up to us to manage that if we record it or just live view it, or a bit of analytical work that might be needed, so it can be done at our end without disturbing the front end, shall we say.
So that requires some pre-planning then, by the sound of it. It's not like something you can do with a sort of no-notice environment.
It all depends on the system and how far it's locked down, but normally it is just a feed off a camera, so it is quite feasible to do. It just depends on the type of system that the company would have or what they've invested in. But with it being so compatible with other equipment, it's not normally a problem.
Okay, all right. And then can I just ask you about storage? So we've got this incident, we've got all these feeds coming in left, right, and centre, coming up through the router into your systems. You've now got them on your server. Some of that was going to need to be used for evidence, potentially if there's a crime that you want to put that into the evidence system. Some of it may be irrelevant. So how do you bring all that together at your end to make sense of all? Because it sounds to me that's an awful lot of storage space, excuse me. A lot of storage space, a lot of stuff to get through. How do you deal with all of that volume coming in with so many sources?
So because we've got the quality of the video feed, like we said, low bandwidth codecs, we can bring in a really good quality video stream. And because that's brought back in and recorded, like I said, on our milestone system, that can be analysed by various departments. So we would distribute that to various teams with different tasks.
Okay, so you're not worried about just the volume of it. That's what worries me, is that there's so much coming in. How do you make sense of it all?
No, we've got suitable storage, and again, when we're planning and prepping that side of things, again in conjunction with our IT system, we have a rough idea of how much we would need, plus a little bit of a failover in case it's needed extra.
Okay, all right. So Neil, going back to the software solution that you have with Semtech, in terms of your deployment of that, could you give us an example of where that's being used in an operational environment? Maybe don't want to be specific about the force or the organisation, but where you've seen it's made a difference.
Yes, so I think from a Semtech perspective, you've got to bear in mind that the product has only just launched. So actually, we've got the pleasure of having the first customer, well, one of the first customers that's actually using this on this call. But if I kind of from a technology perspective, in terms of where this overarching technology is being used, it's being used globally. We have law enforcement agencies around the world that are using it, US, UK. A lot of defense organizations are using it as well. So in terms of global reach, there's an awful, the technology when it was first developed was actually developed for law enforcement and defense. Because some of the important things that we've not talked about are things like the authentication and the encryption and all these other things that make this system secure, which I know we're going to talk about. But a lot of development went into a lot of those features to make sure that it was a secure system. So, and can I just go back on one of the questions you were asking, Nick? And I think this is an important point to bring up, is historically, when organizations such as Nick's organization have been using this technology to stream video into a central environment for a common operating picture, historically, because they would have to record the video at the edge where the quality of the video was. Bearing in mind with the advances of the cellular networks, with the advances of the codec that we're using, now that we can start pushing HD video across these networks, I just want to pick up on Nick's point. Actually, that video doesn't have to be stored at the edge anymore. That video can be stored, because it's of sufficient quality, that video can be stored evidentially at the back end video management system where bandwidth is not an issue. And I think that's actually quite a leap forward from a technology advancement perspective, because historically, if you were receiving low quality video, that wouldn't be good enough. And again, Nick, please correct me if I'm wrong, but that wouldn't be good enough for evidential purposes. It would have to be the original video. But now that with the likes of the software container operating on the Semtech router, that's good enough quality video to be stored at the back end once you've got over that challenge of the difficult network. Getting the video over a difficult network.
So Nick, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Any sort of, like I say previously, should we go back to the analog days? Yes, you got a feedback, and it was good for things like movement of vehicles, movement of people, crowd control, where now, the quality HD products coming back, it's almost real-time CCTV, and the clarity of HD that we're streaming, everything we streamed HD, even looking into 4K for stuff now, which over a cellular network has always been a massive struggle for us.
Do you think, just strikes me when you're talking there about the quality of the video in terms of, and the volume of it, about how you kind of apply these tools which are using artificial intelligence to pick out, the man with the red hat in a huge crowd, that the quality of that video now allows that process to work more effectively. Is that something that you've talked about in your force, Nick?
We are looking into it and trialing different bits of software, but even for visual operators sat there watching it or reviewing it, it makes their life so much easier. So at the moment, we're on the human side of it.
That's interesting. So you're actually better for your staff in terms of the job they're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
A tricky job. Neil, you were nodding when I asked that question. Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. The reason for nodding is because actually, getting the high quality video back over the constraint networks now means that, and I think it's important. Historically, if cameras were going to be deployed, and let's say, for example, they were doing license plate recognition, or they were doing facial recognition, the processing for that, which is very, very process intensive, would have to be at the front end, because if you were trying to stream that video back, the quality of the video would not be good enough to do things like the license plate recognition, the facial recognition. Again, the game changer, I think, here is the fact that, and we are exploring this with other organizations, is you no longer need to do the processing at the end. you can now do that processing at the back end. So actually, I can just take any ordinary camera and I can turn that ordinary camera into a license plate recognition camera at the back end because the quality of video is good enough. I can turn it into a facial recognition camera. There's a whole bunch of different things I can do. And, it comes with even more advantages in that I'm no longer having sensitive data at the edge. So if I've got let's say, for example, I've got a camera deployed running a license plate recognition database or a facial recognition database, if that's out in the open at the edge and that gets lost, there's an awful lot of sensitive data there now, isn't there? So actually, if I'm doing all that at the back end in my secure environment, because the quality of the video coming in is good enough quality to be able to do that, again, that's a game changer. And we've actually got some, I can't really talk about where those deployments are, but we do have some examples of live deployments where that's now being implemented. And I think, back to Nick's point, it's an area where I think you're exploring as well in terms of, because of the quality of video, it does mean you can do a lot of these things at the back end now.
So Daniele, is that those use cases that have just been described there, is that what your intentions were when you were setting it up and sort of thinking what difference it would make?
Yeah. I would say actually to join what Neil's point, it's a matter of operational cost as well, and then especially when you do when you set up the system in your units, in your vehicles, if you can use cameras that are standard cameras and not specialized camera with processing power, high processing power, and so on, you basically reduce the cost of the first deployment of the solution. And then if you use the router as a hub, as a concentrator to collect all these video feeds and encrypt the video feeds in the router, you basically have a central point for communication. And then you also have an efficiency in terms of costs, in terms of connectivity, because you maybe have in the past different cameras with an embedded cellular connectivity, and so different SIM cards. So even on managing different contracts with different operators could be let's say overwhelming. So the fact that you have only one processing point gathering all the video and streaming up to the videos into the data room is definitely as you said, Neil, a game changer.
And does that mean you need less people to do it then? If it's more efficient,
less people.
You could automate
on the vehicle. You will only need actually the same officers actually on the field.
Yeah. I just wondered whether it sounded like less people needed to be involved. The president didn't mean like not giving them a job. I meant just like them doing something else. So just in terms of if you're able to be more efficient in that way, that perhaps you need less people doing the tasks that would be done normally. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we talked about cost efficiencies there. We don't generally talk about the cost of things on the webinars, but in terms of investments for forces who are looking at this, so what's the kind of the business case here for investing in routers and this whole system that you've just described? What's the considerations that they should be looking for in terms of building that business case? What was the elements of that? Neil, should we start with you on that?
Yes, I think it becomes my view on this is that, and I just refer back to the previous conversation where, if I look at, a lot of police forces, only because we work with them, there are systems for systems for systems for systems. There are so many different systems out there that have a huge cost. So I think cost benefits, my first point would be actually fix your problem with video in the first place and get one common video that can be fed into any number of systems is the first one. So from a cost-effective perspective, it means, back to Daniel's points, I'm spending a lot less on all of this expensive edge hardware that's ordinarily required to do the task. That's the first one. And the second one, which we kind of pride ourselves on in digital barriers, is because we're doing that over a very, very constrained network, the amount of data that we're using is so much less. And just to put it into perspective, when you are using the digital barriers software encoder, you're effectively using up to 90% less bandwidth. So bearing in mind, when Nick talked about the quality of video is good enough to store at the edge, think of actually the savings you're going to have on just the storage of video. There's a whole bunch of different benefits surrounding that. So I think just to summarize, cost benefits. One is less equipment, and you've got one. You've just got one element of the system to give that video, and the second benefit is actually you're just using so much less data.
Okay, so Nick, in terms of your force, is that the compelling case that you make to your leadership team, that those are the reasons why invest in this, the difference it will make to the operations of your teams?
Yeah, absolutely. Money's always a big thing, and again, like Neil said, less equipment, less cost with SIM cards, and for me, managing a team, you've not got someone. We haven't got several bits of kit that people are trying to configure or use. They're concentrating on one bit of kit. So if a bit of kit's deployed, it's reliable. We're not going back out to it to change settings and bits and pieces like that. So yeah, the whole money saving comes in a package of the work that we do, the SIM cards, the equipment. It all adds up.
Yeah, can I just ask you about training and skills? So Daniele, when somebody buys a router and perhaps wants to do this setup that you and Neil have both described, what are we looking at in terms of skill sets here? Is this very technical for people to apply, or the skills already exist? Just got to get the sense of what it looks like when you're, looking for a purchasing decision here.
Skill sets. I mean, you typically when you get when you have a Semtech router, you to set it up, it's a pretty straightforward action, I would say, just by configuring the APN and then having the correct configuration for the digital barriers HVIS container. However, I would say that to properly manage it inside of a more complex systems, you would need somehow IT expertise, I would say. So this is directed to IT or project managers that understand basically that working. That is something that I think in Nick's team is something that is available. So that I would say, I think the skills that you need to basically implement that solution on a vehicle. Yeah.
Okay, and Neil, anything to add there?
Sorry, Catherine.
Just in terms of the skills and the sort of training of staff you were using these. I mean, the technology is just changing and moving on so quickly all the time. I worry that people don't have the skills to keep up with it. So that was the reason for the question.
Yeah, I think it goes back to Nick's point, and that is, it's more about technology is always going to have an element of skill required. Of course, it is. You can never move away from that. I think, I'd actually go back to Nick's point and highlight the fact that actually I've no longer got 20 different systems or 20 different boxes that I've got to try and configure. If I've got one, it just means that the skill level requires can just focus on one. So, that's the efficiencies in my view.
Yes, it's a simplification, isn't it? But Nick, in terms of the skills that have changed in your time, those 12 years you've been perhaps with digital barriers, the skill sets of people in your teams must have evolved massively.
Yeah, I mean, we have a wide range of people's skills, and I would say, obviously, the digital barriers kit that we've had, the teams can easily configure and use it. You'll always get people within teams that take a bit more interest in it and might want to go that little bit further for configurations or tweaking things. But as a basic setup, absolutely, we've never had an issue with it.
Great. Okay, that's good. We have a question here. I've been sort of looking at it thinking, I'm not entirely sure what the question is. So I'm going to read it out to you. And I'm hoping your technical skills will allow us to understand it and be able to answer it. So the question is, 3GPP, standardized mission critical video system, is based on 3GPP identity-based encryption and non-proprietary codecs. So this seems to be a parallel or complementary system where a back-to-back client solution or interworking function between servers is going to be needed to connect it to a 3GPP MC system. Can anybody make any sense of that question?
I think we are talking about MCX. Yeah, I mean, I think it's MC video is a 3GPP standard. We are looking at that from Semtech's perspective. Yeah, looking at that at the moment, it's something we're not implementing in the routers. We actually are leveraging the technology from digital barriers, and I think that the discussion we did before about the MCFs, the video management system on the server side can be the point of entry into the MCX system. So there is a video that is encoded down on the router up to the Hendry server, and from that you can basically inject the video with the format actually that is preferred by the server side, so the MCX system, and this is what I think actually is the architecture that we can think with the digital barrier solution.
Okay, Neil, anything to add from you?
No, I think Danielle's clearly addressed that particular question, but I think encryption is very, very key. So as part of, and it's worth highlighting that the standards that we've put the system through have achieved a UK government accreditation. So, the end-to-end, if you want for a better word, a link where you take the video from the very, very source to the point where you feed it into a third-party system, that's AES-256 encrypted. And as part of that AES-256 encryption, it's just worth highlighting and bringing up, that's actually gone through UK government accreditation. So I think, just to add to what Danielle said.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the end-to-end encryption. So most people would think about it being like WhatsApp, where nobody can see what you're doing in theory as you put your messages back and forth. So this idea of it not being interruptible between the beginning and the end. So that's the encryption, which I think is understandable. And you're saying it's standards-based, which is good to hear. We mentioned authentication earlier. We sort of tripped past it, and I'd like to come back to it now to talk about encryption, but also authentication and sort of general cyber concerns about security of these systems. So I wonder if perhaps we start with you, Neil, to talk about the authentication required to keep the system safe, so that this the transfer of the data from beginning to end is done by people who should be on the system.
That's right. And we've, the way the system's been designed is it has all of the tools necessary. The latest thing we've done, which has been a big ask, is single sign-on. The way the system works is basically every end video encoder will go via a server that will then go back to whether it's a third-party VMS or whether it's a user. The security of that, like I said, is effectively an end-to-end AES-256 encrypted link. To be able to manage that, you have to go through an authentication process. So there's a full, it includes things like two-factor authentication. So when you look at the government standards that we have to abide by to have achieved that previous accreditation that I talked about previously, then authentication is just one element of it. You've got authentication, you've got to go through pen testing, you've got to do, there's a whole, bearing in mind that in some instances customers are using public networks. And I think it's just worth highlighting that actually some police forces actually use a private network, so it's even more secure. But the authentication element of it is effectively government standards based, and that's why we've got the accreditation for it.
Okay, so all of those users. So Nick, you'll have your police officers who need to be able to log in and take their body-worn video and stream it through. Are they all authenticating on the system, or the individual officers?
Yeah, so we can allocate from the software our feeds, so we can allocate it, who can view it, who can't view it, who needs to view it, and what teams can have access to that. So that's done all by us. We allocate that.
Right, and so one officer could have a different permission to another one to be able to access that video as it's coming from source through the router up into your server.
And also, it might not just be local, it could be a surrounding force or a force down south. We can still allocate that feed to them for them to view.
How do you do that if they're not known to you in advance? So if you wanted to do that, you did tapping into something you didn't know they had this CCTV or whatever. So
so if we were distributing it to another force, we'd probably liaise with the equivalent of myself there, and we would give them the relevant software for them to download. We would set up the management side of the viewing and then allocate them their stream feed. So they can view it, and then obviously we can take that off them as well once they've finished.
Right. Okay. So it keeps it all nice and secure. Anything else on the authentication side, Neil, from your point of view?
No, I think Nick's highlighted it. You know, we go through this a lot when forces want to collaborate and they want to share video. You know, the whole system is administered. You know, Nick will have his administrator who will administrate the system. So if they are required, they can even do things like set up domains that will, you know, not just limit them in terms of the functions, but actually limit them in terms of what they can view. You know, so the way a domain could be set up is Nick's a team would set up a domain. He would allocate one or two of his feeds to that because that's the only feeds they need to see. And then from an authentication perspective, that's the only authentication he would then share with the neighboring force. Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, you know, but that's you know, to even limit it and ensure that you've got that secondary layer of not getting what's the word, unintentional access to something they shouldn't be getting.
Yeah,
there's a further layer of protection that can be added to answer that, Catherine.
Yep.
Okay. So we've mentioned a few times about getting feeds from different places, things you know about, things you don't know about, police forces. Does that also include like local authorities or fire services or ambulance as other sources who wouldn't ordinarily perhaps you'd be working with to get video from, but might have something like a CCTV on their fire engine, for example, or a local authority? I noticed in London, Hammersmith and Fulham have started to use live facial recognition, but they're not part of Met Police. So those sort of things, would you integrate all of those in as well? Nick, just as an example of how it might work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. We can take feeds from whatever's needed, really. Neil, I know previously we were talking about taking feeds off. Again, depending on what it is, we don't have full access to council CCTV systems. We have previously, but I know, Neil, you said another force has access.
Yeah. So there is. We've done it for a couple of forces to answer the question, Catherine, but where basically, and again, this just becomes a permissions based, you know. So for example, and the easiest example I can use is if a force wanted access to particular feeds from a CCTV organization, they can take one of the Semtech routers, they can plug it into the network. They will be authenticated to be able to view, for example, 2, 3, 4 of those feeds. They would then be encrypted and then sent back into the customer's network where they're able to view those feeds. And that it means they can start running, you know, you talk about all the other advantages we talked earlier on, whether it's running analytics at the back end, it means that they can do that. But, you know, clearly there are a bunch of rules and regulations around, you know, forces that do that. But the point is, it's perfectly possible.
Excellent. Okay, because I do imagine, I mean, we're overwhelmed, I think, by video sources in our lives now. So it's interesting to see how they all kind of find their way into a policing world to enable, which is what we're looking for, is improved public safety and better outcomes. So having all of that, being able to move quickly, efficiently, in a way that's secure, encrypted, and also think about privacy as well. So all of those things, it's amazing actually quite how wide ranging this conversation has been in terms of what can be done with the routers and the solution with you in digital barriers. So we are coming to time now. This is with the point at which I ask you to provide one piece of advice for our viewers today. So we've covered off lots of different things. I'm just going to ask you one by one. So if you wanted someone to go away and have a conversation with a colleague about optimizing video solutions, what would that piece of advice be? So I'll start with you first, Nick. So what do you think the conversation should be?
From my point of view, there are other systems, other bits of kit out there that do same sort of thing. But for me, it was physically playing with a kit and trialing with it and comparing it with other bits of kit, which was a bit of a game changer.
So your advice is that people should get in touch and try and get some kit to play with?
Yeah, absolutely. Advice? Yeah.
I think Semtech might be overwhelmed if we let everybody do that.
Welcome.
Okay, well, it's out there. All right, thank you. Neil?
I think my bit of advice is I appreciate there's lots of video technologies out there. My bit of advice is choose a video technology that actually performs in the real world. Okay, this is all about the real world where, low latency, reliability, and the fact that it can be used anywhere is absolutely key. Because going back to Nick's operational use cases, when officers need it the most, you don't get a second chance.
Yes, it's a very good point. We mustn't forget about the crucial. It's time. Time is absolutely critical with all of this. So yes, thank you for that. Daniele.
Yeah, my bit of advice is when we're talking about video and when you actually set up a solution on a vehicle, for example, think about that the video stream is not only the only one device that equipment actually that is available on the vehicle. So think about the router as a hub, and think about reliability over the time. Because, for example, there are many routers on the field on the market today, but not all of them are made for harsh environments and running into the critical conditions. So a router that works very well on the lab maybe cannot work very well on a vehicle where there are a lot of shock, vibrations, temperature swings. So a rugged solution for mobile application and mission critical application would be advisable.
Okay, it's interesting. Both Neil and Daniele both talked about reliability anywhere and from it's this real world environment, and you talked about harsh environments. I know this is the last bit, but I might just ask you one question about that. So in terms of the actual physical router, you used the word rugged, and I thought ruggedized when you were saying it. Is that the need that it has to be really tough in order to survive being in the back of a police car? Is that potentially what you're saying?
Yeah, potentially what I'm saying. Yeah, it's actually twofold. Is surviving in with sharp vibrations, everything that can happen outside, and on the long term, meaning that the routers has to manage a lot of different conditions for managing the connectivity, managing and keeping the connectivity stable. So something that is rugged enough and well designed for harsh conditions can keep working over the time much better than others that are designed for an office or to stay on the desk.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. That's very helpful. So Nick, you were very much about trialing it, testing it, and presumably in those harsh environments that we've just described. I imagine the North Yorkshire moors can be quite harsh in the winter.
Yeah, exactly. Equipment that's built for inside, it works outside. So again, not repeating things, but something mounted in a vehicle, vibration, temperature change. For me, when things get hot, they expand. When they get cold, they contract. It's not good for circuit boards. So things mounted in vehicles, in summer we do get some hot days, but when we've had them hot days, the equipment has performed, it's carried on. So again, that was a big point for me for trialing the kit and sort of like the sort of going old school, the Pepsi challenge. It does what it does it. So for me, it was physically testing it and putting it through a few scenarios just to sort of say it does what it does on the tin.
Yeah, I think that's Ron Seal, isn't it, rather than Pepsi? Going back in time. Danielle, I probably have no idea what we're talking about because that's a very British thing. But so Danielle, in terms of that testing, there's that testing that you're doing with Semtech, have you already put it through its paces?
Sorry, testing.
The testing, this harsh environment that you've all alluded to just now. Presumably, you've done all that kind of testing as well.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Actually, the routers comes with military standard 810, so it's actually a standard against shock and vibration. So it's resistant to a very wide range of temperature in temperature operating temperatures. So -40 +70 degrees, including with Wi-Fi connectivity. So it's it went through very harsh testing.
So it seems. -40. Goodness me. Hopefully we'll never get that cold. Okay, so I think that draws us to the end of our conversation today. Thank you so much. It's been incredibly useful to really unpick that. And I know a lot of my questions are quite basic, but I think sometimes it's good to kind of get back down to basics and build everything back up again to understand the problem we're trying to solve here with this equipment. So thank you very much for joining me. Thank you, Nick, for providing that insight from the police point of view, and for Daniele and Neil to show how you two are working together to provide these solutions. It's been a very useful conversation. So thank you. You'll leave my screen shortly while I do the exit words for the webinar today. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so that is the last webinar of 2025. I realised recently we've actually done 31 of these now. So it's been lots and lots and a hugely wide-ranging topics. So thank you very much for joining me today for that. Thanks to my speakers and to Semtech for partnering with us today. The webinar will be available to catch up, watch on catch up via the website as soon as I stop talking, so you can watch it all over again. And the notes will be there. So if there's any references we've made today, we'll put those in there. You get your CPD accreditation by email fairly soon after today. And if you're watching catch up, hopefully by the end of the month, that will be Christmas. So possibly not straight away. So we will be doing more webinars next year. So look out for those. And make sure you visit our website, emergencyservicestime.com. And then if you want to sign up for our daily digest, you can do that there and hear from us every day of the working week, which just leaves me to say thank you for joining me and have a good day.